Galina sprang upright. Her heart was pounding so hard, she felt as if she could hear it throughout the room. Behind the wood, the machine was screaming. Sparks must have been flying into the hallway, lighting up the walls, blackening the air. But no one came out. No one opened the door. No one dared. She shouted at him to leave. He roared back that he was going to come in and that they were finally going to talk. Then the sound of the grinder stopped. A few seconds of silence. And then the first blow. A shock so violent that the walls shook. Then a second, then a third. It was no longer a siege, it was an assault. The door began to bend inward. The plaster from the frame was crumbling into dust. The piece of furniture she had pushed across the door slid back a few centimeters with a creak. Then, a hinge gave way. The door sagged, opening a narrow gap. Through this gap, Galina saw his red, wild eyes, filled with raw rage. Then the crowbar slipped into the opening. He was using it as a lever, tearing at the wood. He was trying to rip out what was left. She grabbed the frying pan. Her hands were ice cold, but at that moment, her fear changed in nature. It no longer paralyzed her. It burned. It became anger. A vast, calm, almost pure anger. This man was not going to take her house. He was not going to erase her life. He was not going to make her die like a hunted animal. She ordered Jorik to go into the back room. The dog didn't move. On the contrary, that little lap pug positioned himself next to her, baring his teeth, letting out a deep growl. Amazing, almost unreal in such a small body. Then Pachka's hand reached through the opening. Dirty, tattooed, frantic, searching for a grip to push the furniture away. Galina didn't hesitate. She raised the frying pan and brought it down with all her strength on his wrist. The sound was terrible. A sharp crack, a wild scream. He tried to pull his arm back, but it was stuck. So she struck again. Once, twice, 3 times. Each blow carried sleepless nights, humiliation, loneliness, ignored calls, the fear of dying in the dark. She was no longer striking just to defend herself. She was striking to reclaim the space that had been stolen from her. And that's when Jorik lunged forward. The little dog bit the sleeve, then the flesh, shaking the trapped arm with all its might, as if its own life depended on it. Pachka was now screaming in pain, surprise and rage. He cursed, threatened, almost pleaded all in the same breath. Then the door gave way. With his own frantic movements, the piece of furniture slid aside, and Pachka collapsed into the entryway, along with the remains of the door, falling to his knees inside the apartment he wanted to conquer. His arm was hanging at an odd angle. His face was contorted with pain, but in his good hand, he was still holding the crowbar. Galina stood before him, upright, the frying pan in one hand, the hairspray in the other. He looked up at her. And at that moment, something shifted. He no longer saw a lonely, terrified old aunt. He saw a woman he had failed to break. A woman cornered who, instead of begging, had turned into a wall, into fire, into justice. He tried to get up, raising his weapon. Then she pressed down on the spray can. The jet of hairspray hit him full in the face, directly into his already dilated eyes. He let out a scream, dropped the crowbar, and collapsed to the ground, clutching his face, blinded, disoriented, whimpering like a monstrous child, suddenly brought back to his own weakness. Galina shouted in a voice she no longer recognized as her own. "Don't move." That voice, it was the voice of an entire life. The voice of a woman who had taught, resisted, buried her loved ones, survived everything, and who now refused to be the final victim of her own story. And suddenly, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Heavy, fast, determined. Men in uniform burst through the shattered opening. Law enforcement, helmets, vests, a curt command. The old professor from upstairs, the one everyone thought was too discreet to act, had finally called. He could no longer stand the racket, nor for that matter, the collective silence of the others. Pachka was restrained, handcuffed, taken away, his wrist broken, his eyes burning, his rage finally stopped. When it was all over, the hallway was full of splinters of wood, dust, the smell of hot metal, glue, stale tobacco, and fear. Galina was still holding Jorik in her arms. The dog was still trembling. So was she. Sometimes you win a fight without really getting back what you had before, because the truth is that even after the monster is gone, the evil remains somewhere in the walls. The next day, a new door was installed. A steel door, heavy, almost reinforced, with a video peephole. The professor helped find the craftsman. The neighbors started speaking softly again in the stairwell, as if all of this had just been an unfortunate episode to be filed away among the things people prefer not to talk about for too long. But Galina, she is no longer the same. At night, before going to bed, she still pushes a piece of furniture against the door, just in case. Jorik no longer sleeps on the couch. He sleeps in the entryway. At the slightest vibration, at the slightest noise, he growls. The simple peace she had hoped for in her retirement no longer exists. Her apartment once again smells of vanilla, tea, and old books. But behind these familiar scents, there always remains an invisible trace. The danger that comes from blood, from family ties turned into threats, from that terrible truth that no one dares to face. Sometimes the people you should be able to let in are precisely the ones you must keep out at all costs. And maybe that's the most chilling thing about this story. Not the violence, not the night, not the crowbar, not the door that was cut open. The most chilling thing is that, at first, he wasn't a stranger. He was the nephew, family, blood. That word we use to excuse, to forgive, to make those who protect themselves feel guilty. So tell me honestly, if you were in her place, what would you have done? Would you have opened the door to a loved one in distress? Or, in today's world, do we have to admit that sometimes the deadliest danger already has the face of family?